everybody, and welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
But today, not necessarily about fantasy, although we are talking about budget. Budget. Well, how much budget you got, James?
1.9 million. I'm probably not buying Ben Davies anymore.
Is that all you got left? Oh, why? Did he get injured yesterday for Wales or something?
Not Ben Davies, no. Unfortunate possible hamstring injury for Andrew Robertson.
Oh, dear.
Konstantinos Tsimikas is 3.9.
Oh, he'd be an amazing asset at 3.9.
All that not having Trent looks like it's just going to fall into place for me, I think, depending on the Robertson injury news. Obviously, if he's ruled out, I'll go Tsimikas. I only really even need it for the 2 weeks, so
even better.
Yeah, I'll go in.
Perfect. We are talking today, it's People's Poll Day, so actually tell everybody what the options were and what was quite a clear winner in the end, wasn't it?
There was, I was a bit disappointed with the way the vote went. I thought that this would probably win, but I was expecting a much closer vote. So the three options were Norwich's appointment of Dean Smith as their new manager, which had 26% of the vote. I will quote FPL Badger, our Norwich correspondent, who said, considering our league position, got to be happy with the appointment of Dean Smith. Definitely one that has grown on me. I'm pretty sure we'll win more games between now and the end of the season than we would have under Daniel Farke. Let's hope he can get a tune out of Gilmore, Solis and Cantwell. The one thing just briefly on Dean Smith is he has improved every club he's been at.
Okay.
Be it
yeah,
Walsall,
I've got no
Brentford,
issue with Dean Smith.
Villa.
I think he's decent.
They're 5 points adrift? I mean, who knows?
Yeah, let's see.
Who knows? Could completely change around for them, couldn't it? I think it's a very reasonable appointment. The other topic that didn't win was the FA's 3-year target for women's football in England, which I think would have been a fascinating discussion. And a few of the patrons have already come back to myself and said, "Look, can you do this for us if the general public doesn't want it?" Yeah. Because I think some of the targets set out can be manipulated to make the FA look quite good in terms of hitting certain targets of full capacity for a women's FA Cup final. Average attendance targets, funding for the Women's Super League, which has obviously got a lot more exposure this year with the fact Sky are showing the games and at times that don't clash with, say, other Premier League games. It's growing, but I think probably not at the rate that people actually really wanted. I think there's a real deep dive into that conversation on women's football at the moment. The winning topic was the spending potential of Premier League clubs. Who can and who can't spend big in the forthcoming transfer windows? This topic came about as highlighted by someone who I think we admire, Kieran Mcguire, who's a lecturer at Liverpool University, does a podcast for the Price of Football. He is the man behind a lot of the People's Poll topics, I think, in fairness.
For sure.
And
someone tag him and get him to come on the show one day. Like if all our listeners...
Wait. Let's just get a bit bigger and we'll just fucking invite him on.
Yeah, man. He's a very interesting guy.
He's done an investigation for the Daily Mail about in terms of basically wiggle room. Which clubs have a certain amount of wiggle room, i.e. how much could they spend and not be breaking financial fair play rules? And it's given some very stark and some very interesting results in terms of actually who has the power to spend big and go mental, who should they want to. And there's a couple of clubs highlighted who you would look at on the face of it and go, they have to sell players rather than buying players. There's one very extreme case that we're going to talk about, which is concerning, which got highlighted to us in the summer. And I think we were unaware of the situation at that point. But it's pretty bad. And they're going to have a very, very difficult couple of years. So this isn't, just to clarify this isn't they're going to go and spend this in the next 2 transfer windows. It just means this is essentially what they could blow without it being an issue at the moment. There is a caveat to the fact that this is based on financial results for the last few years, and the majority of clubs haven't posted their financial results for this year. So I'll give you one example. So Aston Villa, basically, according to Maguire's research, could only spend around about £5 million without having some wiggle room. But they haven't posted their financial results yet, and obviously didn't spend anything in the last window and sold Jack Grealish and didn't spend all the money back. So
Bailey,
they will.
That was the same window as Grealish. That was kind of a net neutral window. Really.
Depending on basically what their profits are over the last 12 months, it's likely to go up a little bit. That said, it's still going to be a very, very low amount.
Yeah, it's not going to be 5 to 100 a month.
Steven Gerrard is not going to go and spend 150 million in January. That's very clear from some of this research.
I think it's worth just very quickly going top to bottom with the clubs and the amounts, and then we can start working our way down, because it kind of lays the landscape for who's where. And there were a number of clubs that were in surprising positions for me, which we can kind of look at. I've got the list in front of me. Should we go richest to poorest, James, or poorest to richest? Let's go richest to poorest.
I think that's right.
So Spurs sit quite clearly at the top of the tree with £400 million as a potential budget. Closely followed by Liverpool, 273 million, and Manchester United, 243 million, with Chelsea behind at 241 million, Arsenal 200 million. They're the only 5 clubs that have over 200 million to spend, or in theory. Arsenal, Chelsea, Man United, Liverpool, Spurs.
I think the first thing to pick out of that is you are picking 5 of the so-called Super League 6. There is an obvious name missing now.
There is, and we'll get down to them in a little while. The team that comes 6th, I was blown away, and it kind of puts a little bit more light on the takeover that happened with what's his face and what.
Okay.
Burnley 6th. They could, in theory, spend £171 million. Burnley spending £171 million just staggers.
But they won't.
No. Well, I don't think any of the clubs will spend what they can. Newcastle are then in 7th, and that's no surprise. We did know when the takeover happened that actually, you know what, because of the way Ashley has run the club, that they're not completely skint, and a couple £100 million is not unfeasible. 166 million is where Newcastle sit. From then 8th downwards, everybody's less than £100 million. Leeds 99 million, Norwich 92, Brentford 88. That's 3 clubs that have been promoted in last season or this, which is quite interesting.
It's essentially a year's worth of TV money, basically.
Yeah. You then get down to Brighton at 85 million, and then we get to the other Big 6 member in Manchester City, who only have £84 million based on FFP. I'm not sure if this is post Jack Grealish money, but if you think about some of the big stars that have left Man City in the last few years, they've left for free, like Aguero, David Silva. They're not a selling club that cash in, build a player's value and make money. So they're always net spend going to be in a difficult situation. But Man City at 84 million perhaps explains why they didn't get Harry Kane in the summer, because they can't afford it.
Really could do.
Yeah.
Well, did they offer City 70 million plus bonus, and they've got 84 million wiggle room?
Yeah.
I mean,
makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Their financial results, which again a lot of these are going to get published in the next sort of month or two, may dictate whether they can go back in or not. Because if they haven't had a profit, if Man City don't post a year's worth of healthy, profitable financial results, they are not buying Harry Kane in January. It would be a certainty. No,
exactly that.
Unless they obviously sold 2 or 3 other players to finance that.
Yeah. Leicester in next at 79 million, 80 million pounds, let's say, give or take. Now they have, and they do buy players, and they do well with going into the European market, but they never drop 50s and 60s. It's like 20s and 30s, but they do very well at that 20 to. I think Tielemans must still be their record signing at 40, perhaps 45.
Did they pay that much for him?
I thought Tielemans was around 40, but I'm not sure. We'll check that. Leicester at 79 million, followed by West Ham at 71 million, Wolves at 70 million. I mean, these are all very bunched together, from Brentford all the way down to Wolves at 70. Palace 66 million, Watford 60 million. Then you get into the bottom 3, which is a bit tricky. Southampton at 37 million. Doesn't seem like a big budget for Southampton. They haven't particularly sold any players recently for big money. So perhaps that's got something to do with it. Villa are 19th, that you mentioned, at 5 million. We do think that could creep up a little bit. And then last but not least, sitting bottom of the table, as you mentioned, with the only team with a negative spend requirement is Everton minus 35 million. Minus that, so they have to, in theory, to meet FFP, sell assets this window. Otherwise, they could be in trouble.
I wouldn't say necessarily this window, but the next two
they
windows.
They need to catch up pretty quick because they're not in a position where they can spend without selling. And it goes to show, like, I mean, the broad spectrum, 60 to 100 million for the majority of clubs, a handful in that 150 to 250, and the Spurs clearly ahead with 400 million. I look at it and it really smacks, especially Spurs at 400 million, of a club that could fuck up spending 400 million. Like, buying players does not guarantee success in any way. I mean, my initial reaction was gravitating towards my own club, and I look at 71 million. I'm like, all right, that's two 35 million pound players. That's probably what we need. So it's probably the right amount of money. So it probably makes sense.
I think we should talk about Tottenham a little bit because
I think we have to start there. Because that 400 million number can
insane. Blow minds a little
insane.
Bit.
Yeah.
Just firstly, Youri Tielemans, according to Transfermarkt, was bought by Leicester City for £40.5 million. Well done, Suj. Their record signing. And by the way, I made it sound like they paid that much. Listen, well value for money. By the way, what a player Youri Tielemans is.
Today for 40 million for sure.
But there's a few clubs I want to touch on. I think we should have a little run through not all 20 clubs, but a few clubs. So. The first thing to say about Spurs, according to this Wiggle Room investigation, in theory, could blow £400 million worth of money in January and still be within FFP limits. I think first, probably, actually, before we do Spurs, we should clarify, what do we think of FFP at the moment? Because a lot of people think it's dead, right? But I don't think Kieran Mcguire is not of that opinion. He's kind of the voice that I want to trust, really. I think the fact City got the Champions League ban overturned was a lot of people kind of thought, that's the death knell of it. Then there was obviously COVID, etc. as well, which obviously has relaxed the laws a little bit as well. Do we think FFP is going to continue as it is? That's worth saying as well, right?
I think there'll be some form of financial regulation in football.
I think there has to be. There has to be.
I think there is also a real realization from owners that they can't treat football clubs like toys, and just like in the way that Abramovich did in the mid-2000s. No billionaire will do that now. Obviously, the cost of everything is probably 3 or 4 times it was then. So any owners that are coming in that are billionaires, take Kretinsky at West Ham, for example, he's worth 3 billion. He's not coming in to treat it like a toy and throw money at it and buy players and let's have a bit of fun. It's an investment. And so they will make decisions around investing in the club that are on a sound footing. Like the way that he invests in other businesses, I don't see it being any different with West Ham. So I think owners now are a lot wiser to it. If another COVID outbreak was to happen, like those dreaded words, right? 3 dreaded words. Vaccine-resistant variant. Like, fuck, imagine that in January. And then revenues go again. I think they're all way more aware of the potential downside and pitfalls of overspending and going crazy. So I think the FFP is bringing awareness to it, and there is a bit of self-regulation from clubs. I still do think there's a problem around enforcement and punishment, because we saw, obviously, like you mentioned, City didn't get punished and were able to overturn their ban. So whilst the rules and regulations are there, I think they need to address that accountability and punishment piece for clubs that do break it. But I think it's going to naturally get better over time. Like, it's only been a few years, right? So everything takes a bit of time to adjust. Clubs need to adjust their mindset and mentality. You need a few test cases to see actually what does happen. I think it's around to stick around for a while. And I think the owners are going to start realising that too.
In the case of Tottenham, the 400 million figure actually probably more. The reason it's probably more is the anticipation. I obviously look into Tottenham. Yeah, that's 500 million. I mean, there could be that, yeah. But the anticipation is, and I did mention it earlier, about financial results are obviously going to come out for a lot of clubs. There is real confidence that Tottenham are about to post some very significant and very positive financial results, which actually could boost that 400 million number even further. But we have to remember in the case of Tottenham, before the Spurs fans get excited and think, oh my God, Antonio Conte's got a 400 million war chest. No, he doesn't. Remember that this football club has the biggest debt in the league. One of the biggest in the world at the moment.
The FFP calculations show what you could potentially spend. Now, the real world situation is when you look at how FFP calculations are done, stadium investment doesn't come off what you're allowed to spend. However, you still got to pay for the bloody thing. Right?
Exactly that.
It's like a credit card that you don't count towards your net how much you're worth, but you still got to pay the flipping thing. Yeah. So there's still a lot of repayments that Spurs have to make and have to be consciously aware of. And no club in today's world is going to be dropping 300 and 400 millions in one window, or even a January window, especially. No one spends that kind of money.
No, I think Tottenham could potentially, maybe next summer, drop let's say a payment of 100 to 150 million over a transfer window or so, and there wouldn't be a major impact. Plus, obviously, with the stadium back open, that's a massive differential for Tottenham, because the match day revenue that they get on the day compared to every other club, basically, bar Manchester United at the moment, is off the charts. And despite having a capacity of sort of 15,000 less, once Tottenham's full every week and up and running over kind of year on year, Tottenham, because of the prices of the tickets, are likely to even blow Manchester United out of the water in terms of revenue generated on a match day. So there's plenty of positives for Tottenham from a financial, but really important is, yes, look, there's a debt of basically nearly £1 billion because of the stadium, and that needs to be paid off at the same time. But Tottenham are actually, it's a really weird thing to say, they're nearly £1 billion in debt, but can go and spend money quite comfortably. Is basically where they're at.
Yeah. There was a great line in some of the research that we did. Tottenham have a business model, not a trophy-winning model.
Well, a couple of things to kind of highlight that, because part of this investigation shows the spending on certain things with the big six over the last decade, the period of 2010 to 2020. And there's certain things very interesting. So, for example, Tottenham's wages and net spend as a percentage of revenue between 2010 and 2020 was 55%. Now, the majority of the top clubs are probably operating at sort of between 60 and 70% at the moment, which is where you'll find Manchester United, you'll find Arsenal, Liverpool a little bit above that. Chelsea's 88%. Manchester City wages and net spend as a percentage of revenue over the last decade, 97%. And this part gives us an indication as to why actually City have been on the
edge, the
borderlines of FFP. You might have seen a headline knocking about over the last week or so in terms of the Premier League trying to enforce a ruling that doesn't allow second parties, or let's say affiliate clubs, to pay people's wages, because the legend of the story is that when Roberto Mancini signed his Manchester City contract, he was getting paid about 1.7 million a year from Manchester City, and it was a company in Abu Dhabi who was paying him a similar amount per year as well. So actually was on about 3.4 or 3.5 million pounds a year, but Manchester City were only paying half of it and getting around FFP that way. Kind of unbelievable to think that wasn't in place anyway.
Yeah.
Another thing to highlight from that as well, profit loss before tax over that period. Spurs is 401 million, which is, I guess, where we get the wiggle room from, but that doesn't equate to every club's. Manchester City's over that period is a loss of 441 million pounds.
Big loss.
Again, giving you an indication of why their wiggle room's not so much. It's worth saying Chelsea over the same period, a loss of 246 million pounds, whereas the other members of the Big Six, United, Liverpool and Arsenal, are all well in profit over that decade. United at 128 million, Liverpool 172 million, Arsenal 234. The reason Tottenham's wiggle room and profitability over this period is so massive is primarily the lack of expenditure on wages and transfers over that period as a combination. And what it actually does is it fuels the fire amongst the anger from Tottenham fans towards the owners, and looking at it, because these numbers just make you look at it and go, why haven't you invested more in the transfer market? Because you could have.
Yeah.
Now it
cash
might be coming.
Is a very interesting phenomenon. Like even from a business point of view, I was speaking to somebody the other day. Numbers can be relative, but depending on what your turnover is, there's a point at which you can say, hang on a second, you don't have enough money in the bank and cash to sustain your business. But there's also a point where you say, you've got too much money in the bank. Why aren't you using it effectively to help grow your company and investing it in areas that need investment? And there is such a thing as, from a business point of view, having too much cash that's not being reinvested. So we'll see what happens definitely with Spurs coming into the window. I just think January is not a good time to gauge what clubs are going to do, because other than the clubs that need a change in their league position, like Newcastle, perhaps Norwich, and so on. But I don't think it's a good time to gauge what people's spending behaviours are going to be. Next summer's transfer window, should we stay COVID-free and everything run smoothly, I think will be a much better indication of where clubs think they are.
Okay, I want to touch on the other two clubs who have got really high numbers that you perhaps might not have expected, Burnley and Newcastle.
For sure.
In Burnley's case, the report suggests that basically should Burnley go and blow that £170 million worth of wiggle room, it could fold the football club, basically. So they haven't really got that to spend. Burnley are obviously working on a real low budget within the Premier League. I want to say they possibly play the lowest wages, if not the lowest, obviously very near the bottom of that. They've been very prudent over the last decade. They've got money in the bank in terms of they had the kind of the yo-yo year back in the mid-decade as well. They've got regular revenue stream coming in of Premier League money. What that money in the wiggle room basically allows for Burnley Football Club is that if they go down, they're in a very comfortable position at the moment to wipe kind of 100 million off that wiggle room and not have to spend money, not be forced into having to sell the whole squad. And Burnley budget their way based on the fact they could get relegated in any year.
Yeah.
In Newcastle's case, the 166 million, is it?
Correct.
Suj?
Yes.
That number in reality is about to become far higher, probably at least double. Not just purely because of the investment from PIF, but basically because the endorsements growth of that football club, basically nothing has been done with it.
No.
So I saw on a different...
you've basically got Mike Ashley.
I saw a different report which showed a load of Premier League clubs, certainly the so-called Super League 6 and Newcastle, and how their commercial revenue had grown from 2006 to now. Newcastle's had grown 1 million.
Yeah, but then Mike Ashley, I reckon if he could have, he would have renamed the football club Sports Direct United, but obviously clearly he couldn't. All of the Sports Direct marketing and advertising, hoardings, stadium, everything was not at market value, and he was helping himself with his other business. Now the reality is, for Newcastle to come out of that period in a profit, in a strong financial position, in spite of that, is a really good story for Newcastle fans moving forward. It wouldn't have felt it at the time, for sure. So definitely now that they're in a position to sign commercial agreements and sponsorship agreements at the market rate, it's clearly going to jump up. And of course, I think it's such a well supported club where people will buy the merch and buy the stuff and get behind the supporters and sponsors. You definitely want to be involved with Newcastle as a sponsor because their fans are so loyal. So yeah, I'm well up for that.
That's a whole different debate in terms of do sponsors want to be associated with that at the moment.
Well, yeah. So again, there's the flip side. That statement was very much coming from are their fans very loyal? Like, take some London clubs, for example. You get so many tourist fans in the stadium and stuff. Geordies are Geordies. You got to love their passion. So obviously, yeah, with the ownership of the Saudi Arabians, there's a different conversation to be had.
Yeah, absolutely. I was trying to find a quote that was in this
from
account from someone said something about comparing Newcastle and Man City.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find the quote because it was so good. Oh, here it is. The big difference with Manchester City is that Newcastle are genuinely a bigger club, said Dr. Rob Wilson, a lecturer in sports business management at Sheffield Hallam University. And I was thinking about that, and I judge football club size basically based on that, fan support. Now, Manchester City are not a small club. It's not like Bournemouth got the takeover and Bournemouth spent all that money. Manchester United is a very big football club. But I think what your man Rob Wilson was saying was like, look, that because of the One City thing, the size of the football club, we know that they'll fill that stadium every week. When Newcastle get into the Champions League, which probably inevitably will happen in 5 to 10 years' time, there are not going to be empty seats at St James's Park like we've seen on certain occasions. Not just at the Etihad, we've seen it at other clubs as well. That's not going to be the case at Newcastle. They are going to be full every week. So there's that growth of revenue as well, because remember their average attendances have kind of been on average sort of 10,000 below capacity, because a lot of people have been disillusioned with what's been happening there over the last decade. So Newcastle have real power. But I think in terms of the immediate without endorsements, if they don't have anything come through the door, I'm not sure that they could spend more than sort of 100 million net in January.
Yeah.
Just in case it went sideways, and they obviously still went down. They've got to be a little bit cautious of that. So they could, if they spent, say, 200 million in January and went down, they are going to have to sell players in January. So it's a little bit of a balance in that, despite saying that number's probably going to double very quickly to make them clearly the biggest spenders, I think, in the league, is the more likely. But they've got to be careful this January. I think they're going to be looking at quite a lot of loan signings and stuff with no real commitment. If they go down, perhaps commitments to buy certain players should they avoid relegation.
Agreed, definitely on that. Anyone else kind of stand out? You look at the likes of Norwich and Brentford that have 80 or 90 million.
These are not surprising ones.
But you kind of feel like they're not going to spend. They'd rather not spend, roll the dice on survival versus relegation, and leave themselves stable to rebuild, to come back up and yo-yo, rather than go for it in January to try and save your skin.
I think the ones I want to highlight there's three teams in kind of the middle group that stand out to me. One is your own, Suj, West Ham, which with increased European competition through this year, maybe in forthcoming years, that's obviously going to take a jump as well. With that means you can charge higher ticket prices, etc. So I think West Ham will... Sorry, mate.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting away with it. I do feel I'm getting away with it.
Yeah, you pay about a third of my price, mate. Which is why, so if people go, oh my God, well, West Ham are getting 60,000 in the ground every week as well. Yeah, but their match day revenue for an individual match is about 4 million less than Tottenham because of the ticket prices.
I mean, a lot of people won't actually be aware, but for example, your season ticket, what, 1,400 quid?
13.
Mine's like 650 quid.
Mine is nowhere,
half the price.
Mine is nowhere near the most expensive.
Exactly, half the price.
Mine's about average.
You want to take your kid, how much discount do they give you?
Nothing. Unless you sit in one particular block on the other side of the stadium.
And my kids is 200 quid. Yeah. And so that did multiply that by 60,000 people suddenly, and you're clearly at 4 million.
Success will bring you all these things, because they'll look at Tottenham and go, well, Tottenham make this per match day, we make this per match day. Oh, right, okay. We need to change some, and the model will change. That will come with success for West Ham fans.
The good thing is that I just don't think it will happen overnight. Like, you can't double your prices overnight. Fans wouldn't allow it, and it won't happen. So it's going to take 10 years to get to that level. It also suggests to me, though, and I know a lot of people are GSB out, and we know there's your new Czech man, Kretinsky, who's coming to the football club. That's going to bring some much-needed investment. So West Ham's is kind of higher than what it looks as well. I don't know, but it also makes sense why you haven't gone mad, I think. No, but I think I mean, there's so many reasons behind it. I think we learned from previous mistakes. And when Kretinsky did come in, he's put in either side of a couple 100 million quid, but a lot of that, we took a loan of 150 million through COVID. That's cleared now, so we don't have that debt. So there's not as much debt within the club, which is a good thing, obviously, to service. So moving forward, that will be interesting to see. I just think I'd like to see us buying 20 to 30 million pound players from the Championship, like we have done, to keep developing them, because it's working well so far. But West Ham, you'd think, would be in a better position. I'd see that number going up. The two other clubs just want to touch on very briefly. Wolves, there's been a bit of suspicion from Wolves fans that they might be asset stripping. Now, none of their major players have left as yet, and this number suggests that they don't need to, but if they don't, it also suggests they're probably not going to be spending very big. The one that really stood out surprising for me, more than kind of Manchester City, was Leicester. Leicester being in there at 79, because they've kind of been consistent qualifiers for Europe over the last few years. Obviously had the FA Cup win. They had the Champions League year a few years ago as well. And they also cashed in big money on Harry Maguire. And that massive. Especially, and Ben Chilwell. Yes, Chilwell was a big... And actually, if you look at that, if you took away, I mean,
the wiggle room is basically the money they sold Harry Maguire for. So it suggests to me that there's something in the model that means that Leicester City still need to be selling players at the moment. Now that's also going to change for them because they're putting investment into a new state-of-the-art training ground. I think it might even already be open. And they've also got plans to expand one of the main stands, which is going to take the capacity up to around about 40,000 as well. So they've identified that one of the ways they can obviously increase their revenue is obviously get more people in the ground. Leicester do regularly sell out every week, in fairness. So I think Leicester's will go up, but I think it's interesting that they're quite low on this table, despite the fact over the last 3 or 4 years, however long FFP kind of rate, they've had some big sales in there, like Maguire or Chilwell. If they'd not sold those two players, they'd be in trouble.
Yeah, for sure.
They'd have to be selling those players, basically, is how it looks at the moment. Southampton's not too surprising to be quite low at 37 million because just the model of that football club for so long has been about selling players.
Yeah.
Villa,
they have youth coming through and stuff always quite regularly at Saints.
Villa we've touched on in terms of like there isn't mass money for Steven Gerrard to go mental in the financial market, but the situation is probably a little bit better than what this report shows because of their activity in the last window.
Yes.
Everton, I mean, I would look at Everton's number of wiggle room of minus 35 million and say it is an absolute certainty that at least one of Dominic Calvert-Lewin or Richarlison will be sold in the next 6 to 7 months.
I agree with you on that, yeah. I mean, who else do they have that they can sell for big money?
Well, at Luka Dean, maybe. Decore, get your money back and stuff. Pickford, maybe. They are going to have to. What's happened at Everton was they went out, they spent too much money, they gambled on hitting the top 4, they spent way too much on wages, and the reality is they didn't really get that close.
It's funny because if you look at and say Everton have been overspending,
doesn't feel like
it doesn't feel it, does it? I'm like, who?
But when you look at the number, but transfer fees like 53 million on Sigurdsson and stuff like that,
yeah, I suppose they do add up.
I mean, they start coming round quite quickly. There's been failures of players. I mean, how much they spend on Alex Iwobi, for example, 25 million or so.
Richarlison,
you get another 2-3 of them. I mean, Richarlison's different because he's an asset that you'll get your value back. And obviously, Calvert-Lewin's come through. I mean, they went from Sheffield United for peanuts when he was a kid, but essentially he's come through the development there. But they are in a position of urgent need of selling players by the looks of it, which makes more sense. We didn't realise the situation when Sean at Spirit Blues came on correspondent week in pre-season. He was like, look, we're in trouble financially here. And this report, when you just compare it to the other clubs, I mean, they are, without doing nothing, they are, 100 million behind mid-table competition, right? Let's be real. Yeah. Rather than, I mean, in terms of Everton's fans' ideology would be to try and break into that top 6, right?
Considering they started the season so well as well.
When you compare the financial money that they're behind, put Newcastle into that bracket, and then we're saying, you know, the likes of Leicester, West Ham have probably got more amount of money than these figures actually show. Everton are so far behind that I think their fans are in for a really difficult, and I don't mean year or two, I mean possibly decade.
Yeah, the other added problem here, which we talked about with Spurs, is around the stadium development. So the
Everton have that coming.
Development doesn't show on this, and from what my understanding is, when I was doing a bit of reading yesterday, is that Magiure has been looking to try and get financing in for Bramley Moore, and because of what's happened in the last 18 months with COVID, there hasn't been as many people willing to finance it, and he's had to put his hand into his own pocket to finance what needs to be financed right now with the stadium and the development and what have you, which is a big problem, because then you're also saying now your rich owner is having to spend his money on this stadium, which doesn't come into FFP anyway, but he hasn't got that much money that he can still then plug the gap with players and what have you. Well, I think their stadium development is so needed and so important long term, but it's going to cause them such a world of hurt short term, more pain than even you having to get the train to Wembley for fucking 18 months. I just see this as something really concerning. I mean, Everton, there's no risk at the moment of relegation or not anything like that, but they're one of the only clubs in the Premier League that have never been relegated, from my understanding. Is that right? I think Everton are up there, as they've always been a top flight club.
Everton have never been relegated from the top division, ever.
Exactly. And then you start thinking, well, you don't want to see a club with that much history start imploding because the wheels completely come off and what have you. So to see that they're a negative net spend now with some of the other stuff going on around it, is a real concern. I mean, they've got a manager in there in Rafa Benitez that will work within restrictions and keep them up, as he's shown with Newcastle year in, year out. But that's not where Everton Football Club want to be.
No, it's really, really not. But I think Sean nailed it on the head in the summer when he said, actually, look, this football club needs a pragmatic manager at the moment who can compete. And Rafa's a very experienced manager, and he's been down there with Newcastle. We're not saying Everton in a relegation battle this year. No, not at all. But actually, if this trend continues, there's a possibility that they are going to be in the forthcoming years. You cannot look at them numbers and know that Newcastle are pushing, West Ham are pushing, Leicester are pushing, and see Everton get back in there when there's other clubs like Leeds, when they get more sustainable in a few years, are probably going to have their own ideas of trying to break into the top half properly, etc. Arsenal obviously went through kind of this decade-long process of knowing that they were very restricted in terms of their spending because of the new stadium. Tottenham have had a bit of that as well now, but then look at Tottenham's situation in terms of what the spending power is despite the debt and the income that's going to come through the stadium. So imagine Everton are now paying for this new stadium and sitting there saddled with having to sell players. We can't afford to go and buy players at the moment. They are building a new stadium and have to sell players. They are in my opinion, for an extremely painful few years.
Why have you only got 1 point more than them then? Nah, this is the interesting thing that I say it tongue in cheek.
It doesn't mean Everton can't finish top 6 this year if they get players back fit and stuff, right? Which could make a big difference.
It's really interesting because the ultimate caveat is that money's only one piece of the jigsaw. You've got to have the right players with the right tactics and the right squads, and you can look at it and think, oh, we're screwed, we've got no money, or yay, we've got loads of money. We've seen it all, right? We've seen players on a shoestring or clubs on a shoestring do so well, and we've seen clubs piss money up a wall.
Well, no, it doesn't mean Everton are going to be unsuccessful on the pitch. You look at your case, right?
Yeah.
Similar to what Tottenham had with Pochettino in terms of it was never going out and spending silly money.
No.
I mean, the players you've got in your squad have come from, I'm thinking like Antonio from Nottingham Forest, Ben Rama from Brentford, Bowen from Hull. You haven't gone out and blown money stupidly and
like
exactly Rice through the youth development. The only one that's come from Aaron Creswell's been at youth for years from Ipswich.
Yeah.
Where did Soufal come from? Craig Dawson from Watford.
Zuma, you just say, but Zuma was 30 million.
So I mean,
today's market feels
Zuma from Chelsea. I mean, to be fair, I think you got a pretty good deal there actually.
Yeah,
anyway,
exactly.
He's the only one really that's kind of dropped down from
higher level.
I wanted you to say that rather.
Yeah, but it's fair play. They're Champions League winners, mate. So you know what I mean. And when you look at their existing centre backs, Christensen and Rudiger and those guys, I actually think that it was not even a case that he wasn't good enough. It was just surplus to requirements. At Chelsea, just got too many of the guys. When you've got young players like Tamori, who's gone now, obviously, but Shalabar and Sarr. How many centre backs have they got there? So
well, this is why Chelsea are not in problem, because the churning of Livramento's obviously sold this year for decent money and stuff.
Yeah, a really interesting read. I mean, there's a lot of good content out there on FFP, so I would encourage everybody to go and have a look at it because it really is fascinating. Not only that, obviously, we mentioned Kieran Mcguire, so we give him a lot of good shout-outs. He's just a very easy-to-understand bloke when he talks about the finances of football, which can get very murky. He has a podcast that he does with another chap called The Price of Football, which is well worth subscribing to as well. I love a little listen. They do kind of weekly shows, and I think they're kind of like new, half an hour and you get 5 minutes per topic type stuff. So do have a look at that. But really interested to see what your thoughts are, listeners, on it. Jump in the comments, whether it's on Twitter or YouTube, and let us know where you think your club can and should be spending money this January window, if at all. Maybe they should keep their powder dry.
No, I think Tottenham should spend 400 million. That's the amount of investment the team needs anyway.
Good. Thank you for tuning in to today's People's Poll. We'll be back at you tomorrow with Sky Fantasy Football, prepping for this weekend. And on Thursday, Clash of the Correspondents, you have with you, James?
Stephen Toomey, Gary Robinson, Watford versus Manchester
I'm
United.
only tuning into that to find out where Stephen's going to be recording from, to be honest with you.
Don't know. Could be the mobile car unit. I don't know
exactly
at this moment.
And on Friday, of course, an Ask James live stream. For the Patreons, James, we have today a look at football curriculum. Should it be introduced into the education system?
It's a challenge we've been set to set a football curriculum for English football history, basically.
Tomorrow, Tottenham will be going into looking at atmospheres inside stadiums. And ironically, obviously, West Ham have a bit of trouble with an atmosphere at an away ground from yesterday's news. If you haven't heard, obviously banned from going to Vienna. On Thursday, we have our regular weekly quiz topic this week, James.
Current Premier League goalkeepers.
Nice. There's 20 of them. Well, reserves as well, so maybe 35, 40.
I'm not letting you in.
And on Friday, of course, for patrons, differential show, team reveals for James and I, and all the other little competitions that we run.
I've already told her what I'm doing. Robinson.
So, if you are interested in supporting the show, then there's two ways you can do it. One, subscribe wherever you're listening to the podcast. Hit like, smash a like on YouTube, and so on and so on. And alternatively, and even better, go to patreon.com/Planet FPL, where you can subscribe to becoming a supporter of the show. Get additional podcasts each and every day. Join our Slack community, prize leagues, and more. And we'd love to have you as part of the community, but that's the spiel.
You're getting really good at that, you know that.
I say it fucking 300 times a year, mate. Stay safe, friends. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Be nice to each other. Cue music, please, man, child.